Well, good evening and welcome to CIR's Annual Gala. Whew. My name is Sandy Campbell, of course. I'm the Executive Director of the Santa Fe Council on International Relations, and we are thrilled that you've chosen to join us here tonight. And we, of course, are gathered here, wherever here might be for you during these strange and unpredictable times, to celebrate, once again, our high school and college education programs, to support opening a wide and dazzling window to the world for the next generation, which tonight we're calling the evolution of global education. This pandemic has forced all of us to learn and work in very different ways, no matter our age. We've all become both expert at Zoom and fatigued by it. We have spoken countless words while on mute, but through it all, we've found new and amazing ways to do what we humans have always done so well, to connect with each other, to communicate with each other, and to build new bridges that collectively take us forward. And for CIR, we've undergone a grand digital pivot since March of last year, turning all of our programs into digital offerings. Tonight, for instance, is our 112th live stream since March last year. And I love the fact that I got to sit right here and interview Bob Woodward and Nick Kristof and others for Journalism Under Fire, wearing jacket and tie and my PJ bottoms. That is a very unusual career highlight for you. So, in the spirit of sitting in our PJs, let's have some fun tonight. Open up your chat window, set it to panelists and attendees, and tell us where you're watching from and how, and where in the world you hope to travel to next. Where will your post-vaccination travels take you? And in the meanwhile, let's go back to March 2020, to the night of our annual gala with Ambassador Susan Rice. Look at how innocent we were that night, how unknowing at just how much the world was about to change. Inhabitants of a simple, but of course an ominous time. But nonetheless, that night we raised significant funds for our student program and featured two students about to go on a CIR-sponsored, but eventually canceled exchange abroad, including this young woman, Stephanie, now a senior at Capitol High, who was all set to fly in an airplane for the very first time. All of our student programs are now online, including our Next Gen Sim policy simulation, which this year thrust students into role-playing their way through wildfires ravaging the Amazon basin and how to collectively design a better energy grid to mitigate future fires. But I think most importantly, this year our flagship high school fellowship program has benefited enormously from the digital realm, as we now know how to reach students across the state from Deming to Farmington. Hello, Deming. We know you're watching out there. It's great to have you. With a hybrid model now in place for the next academic year, we'll double the number of students in this program from 30 to 60. Our fellows meet twice a month with our speakers, our international visitors, and other leaders for in-depth conversations, all designed to help them understand the educational pathways that they might pursue, leading to careers in international relations or law, or even the Foreign Service. I sure hope we have some future ambassadors among us in this program. And of course, our fellows have the opportunity to access our Fellows Fund, which provides laptops and other technologies for those in need and sends students abroad for language immersions and cultural intensives. We were supposed to send our first 3 students abroad this past summer, but COVID, of course, had other ideas. This coming summer, though, even with a restricted world out there, we'll be sending Stephanie to Italy for a language immersion and, of course, her very first ride in an airplane. And in the full embrace of the digital, our fellows have developed our Global Citizen Summit, which is right here, which launches this Saturday. Run entirely by our fellows, we'll talk all about truth and reconciliation commissions, the genocide of Native Americans, child marriage in Yemen, and youth protests in Chile. It's a free event, and we welcome all of you to attend to see our fellows' fine work. And this is all a direct result of your support for what we do. As I'm fond of saying, we are a community organization, we serve our community, and thus we're only as strong as our community supports us to be. That includes all of you here tonight, whether you bought a single ticket or a partner sponsoring us. Your help changes the lives of these incredible students by giving them an invaluable awareness, a dynamic exposure to the fascinating and so very complicated wider world. So tonight, let's support and celebrate the evolution of global education. Many of you joining us are yourselves sophisticated lifelong learners, and I know how committed you are to seeing fantastic global opportunities reach our students. So tonight, let me encourage you to pass on your love of learning about the world to the next generation. Your support helps to build this incredible bridge across our state's many divides. To that end, let me show again tonight's sponsors and individuals. First, we have Hotel Santa Fe, one of our longstanding community partners. Then we have our friends at New Mexico Highlands University, New Mexico Bank and Trust, and the New Mexico Innovation Triangle, with many thanks to John Rizzo for his great support of tonight's gala. Then we have Information Nation through the Deming High School Library and Media Services. Let me give a big shout out to Teresa Ortiz, the high school's librarian and media specialist. And I know many of you down in Deming are joining us tonight, and we're so happy to have you with us. And here we have two longtime supporters of CIR in Roadrunner Shuttle and Charter, thanks to Kathy and Mark Greenberry, and UBS Financial Services, and our longtime supporter in Rob Hoffman. Thank you all so much. Your support is so incredibly appreciated. And of course, we're deeply grateful to our individual sponsors as well. And now let's hear from our fellows themselves, reflecting on this evolution of global education.
Thank you for giving to support global education.
Global education is important to me because it is extremely important to be aware of the world we live in and how our actions can affect others.
Global education is necessary for creating a new generation of conscious citizens ready to reach across borders and solve society's problems together.
Global education helps us not only understand the issues, but it also teaches us how to research them and to learn more on our own.
The 3 years I have been a part of CIR and this fellowship, I have learned so much, and I am so grateful for that.
CIR has reaffirmed my interest in pursuing a career in international relations.
It was a wonderful opportunity to experience the program and to work with the people in it.
And I'm excited for more chances to continue this journey around the world from my own room.
As people here on this planet, we are all global citizens, whether we're American, Mexican, Canadian, British.
Today, more than ever, we have shed the harmful isolationism of the past and embraced the benefits of fluid borders, international cooperation, and increased cultural awareness.
Realizing that we are all interconnected has in many ways shaped my approach to learning, as well as how I act towards others.
We are no longer simply American, Italian, or Chinese, but citizens of one planet, brought together by our common needs and increasing understanding of each other.
Because the world is becoming more and more one global community.
The Earth is our home, and we have to coexist with each other on it. In order to coexist, we should be knowledgeable of what is going on around us, and, as a future generation, how we can improve our relations with others and the state of our world.
A world with fair and sustainable development that stems from international cooperation.
And to be able to communicate with people around the globe, it is important to understand and celebrate their cultures, and to understand that our differences shouldn't drive us apart, but instead should bring us together.
We all have the same goal. We just want to live in a peaceful, happy world.
Thank you for attending the gala.
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 Thank you for attending this gala, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving to support global education.
Amazing, amazing, amazing students. It's been such a great pleasure working with them over the years. We just have some extraordinary folks in our midst all across the state. So that's it from me. I'm going to now bring in our board president, Chuck Case. Well, good evening, Chuck. How are you?
Great, Sandy. How are you tonight?
I'm good, thank you.
Well, good evening to you and to all of you in Santa Fe and all around the world, really. Sandy said, I'm Chuck Case, CIR board president. Just how about those marvelous CIR high school fellows and their inspirational stories of what CIR has meant to them? You know, these young people give me great hope for a brighter, more compassionate future. And I hope you feel the same way. So much so that I hope you will take a few minutes right now to make a generous donation to support our global education programs. Before we have the opportunity to hear from Jim Comey and Valerie Plame, once again from our students and also from some of our members. You can see on the screen right now some examples of what different levels of giving could support. So find your passion and please support it. For example, $5,000 could support study and travel abroad or learning a language abroad. $2,500 could help 100 high school students attend specially designed programs as part of our programs. $1,000 could underwrite a paid internship. We all know the words unpaid internship. What about the words paid internship? 750 could also help those students that we have who don't have the means themselves to acquire a laptop for their schoolwork or for exploring the world. $500 could sponsor 10 students to attend our wonderful journalism conference in November and December that's called Journalism Under Fire. And $250 would sponsor a high school fellow for a full year. And finally, $100 would help bring international visitors to a school once we have international visitors with us again. You know, I asked Sandy to let me know if there was something happening. So let me take a quick look at my phone. And yes, indeed, as we were hoping, we've just heard that there is a $5,000 matching gift from one of our great and wonderful supporters. So let's match that $5,000 as quickly as we can. And that would add a quick $10,000 to our global education programs to support the kinds of things I was just describing. So the process is really simple. There are 3 ways to give. Each is fully explained on the screen that you can see right now. First, you can give by text. You pick up your mobile phone, open the messaging app, type in 44321. That's the number to call or number to text to, 44321. Type in the words global youth. It's not case sensitive. You can use a space or not use a space. It doesn't matter. And you will receive a link back, and that link will take you to our Gala giving page. Now, this part is important. When you get to the Gala giving page, there are lists of gift amounts, including a blank amount. You can put in what you'd like, but you need to choose the right amount, and you need to choose whether it's a lump sum gift or a monthly gift. And if you do the monthly option, make sure you put in the amount per month, not the total amount for the year. Then you choose how you want to pay, you fill in the required information, and voila, you've made your gift and it works great. So good job. Or you can go to sfcir.org/gala-donate and make your gift directly on the website. You will have the same choices as you have on the text menu. Or finally, if you'd prefer, you can call one of the numbers that's listed on your screen, 505-982-4931 or 505-585-4774. And one of our team will be there to assist you. So consider this. We have an online crowd of over 350 people tonight. If half of us on this event right now were to give $250 each, that would be a whopping $43,000. And how about this? If you choose the monthly option, $25 a month towards the student's future, I think that's about a pumpkin spice latte a week, maybe plus one. We'd raise over $50,000 to launch these students' future as global citizens. So now let's hear a personal message from our representative in Congress for Northern New Mexico, Teresa Leger Fernandez, on what CIR has meant to her and her family.
Hello, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Teresa Leger Fernandez, serving New Mexico's beautiful and beautifully diverse 3rd Congressional District. The Santa Fe Council on International Relations plays a vital role in New Mexico, educating thousands of students every year about a globalized world and how to be responsible citizens wherever you may call home. These programs provide internships and education opportunities for our students to learn more about U.S. foreign policy and the global economy. My son, Abelino, was an intern and would come home and explain in generous detail the different delegations and the stories he heard at CIR. His excitement led me to host Jordanian prosecutors and Indigenous and Aboriginal leaders from New Zealand and Australia. But more than that, the CIR provokes deep thought about the role different actors play in our world, from the role of prosecutors in the rule of law, to what does it mean to have the attack on journalists. We live on a single planet and must understand the interconnected nature of our lives, democracies, and economies. Thank you to the Santa Fe Council on International Relations for the opportunities you provide to our children as they prepare to affect their future. Muchísimas gracias.
Well, thanks, Teresa, for that great story. I remember Abelino well. It was terrific to have him with us at CIR. So if we all give at a level we can, and at a level that feels right and good to each of us, whether it's $250 or more or less, or in a lump sum or through a monthly gift, together we can help these students accomplish great things. So let me just go over that one little bit again. Text to 44321, type in Global Youth, and hit send. Then go to the link that's texted back to you. And there will be a complete menu of options there, and make sure you fill it out carefully. Or you can go to our website where we have the same list of options, sfcir.org/gala-donate. Or we have members of our team standing by at 505-982-4931 or 505-585-4774. Well, I told you we had a challenge grant of $5,000. Is there anybody else out there who would like to issue a challenge? If so, it's not hard to do. Just call one of the numbers on the screen, 505-982-4931 or 505-585-4774, and let one of our team know. And don't worry, if you want to issue a challenge to any of your fellow Zoom participants, our staff will contact me immediately, and I'll broadcast it to the world. And your challenge will double the money that others give. So just remember that. While we have the challenges in place, every dollar you give gets doubled. It's a wonderful deal. So now I think we should hear from our students again.
I'm so grateful for the opportunity I was given to be part of CIR.
CIR opened my eyes to all of these different wonderful programs where I can meet people my age around the world.
Thanks to CIR, I will be flying out to Rome, Italy to learn the Italian language, which I'm really excited about.
I have greatly deepened my ability to connect to concepts rarely discussed within my local sphere of influence.
My internship experience at CIR opened so many amazing opportunities for me.
My generation is facing pressing global challenges, and in order to solve these issues, we must first understand them.
Having a greater understanding of non-domestic ideas and strategies applies to our ability to overcome challenges we are going to face as adults.
Global education is really important, and I think it happens when you start having conversations with people who have different perspectives from you.
Through those perspectives, I have been able to put myself in the shoes of others, which is really interesting and amazing and something that I would not otherwise have been able to do.
It is global education that facilitates this understanding, and by opening ourselves up to new perspectives, we are not only strengthening the connection between our race, the human race, but also modifying our own beliefs and becoming better scholars, citizens, and people in the process.
With the help of CIR and the CIR Fellowship Fund, I got a scholarship to travel abroad to Germany.
My knowledge about world affairs has been expanded so much.
I now attend a local international baccalaureate school, and the international focus of my teachers and courses has continued to highlight, for me, the importance of having a global education.
And in the fall, I'll be pursuing my master's in conflict resolution and negotiation, and that would not have been possible if it wasn't for my experience working at CIR.
And I just want to thank CIR for all the help and support they provided for me. Thank you, CIR.
So before I go on, let me announce first that we have met the $5,000 match. Thank you all so much. That is fantastic. And I really appreciate it. And I've just been advised that we have another $3,000 match that's on the table, another opportunity to double your donations. And by the way, I am really enjoying, I hope other people are too, the notes in the chat room from everybody about where you're listening from or watching from, where you want to visit. It really is great. It is terrific to see that. So now we have another challenge of 5,000, and I'd really urge you to help us meet that. You know, for me, hearing from these students is really inspirational, and I want you to remember one of them, Nani Detti. Nani is a graduate at St. John's College here in Santa Fe, and is from Ethiopia. She is fantastic, and I think you will see and hear a lot from her over the course of the next many years, as she will, I'm sure, assume important roles in that important country. So with your support tonight, CIR could double or even triple the number of students who will be able to take part in international exchange programs, to travel and study abroad, once that becomes a reality again. They will be able to learn a new language, to live in a different culture, to do and experience things that will be life-changing for them. And building on what we just heard from one of the students, for the past 2 years, our high school fellows have engaged in a photo exchange with students in our sister city of Bukhara, Uzbekistan. So even this past year, as the pandemic affected the world, our high school students, high school fellows, and students in Bukhara exchanged photos chronicling their daily lives in 2020, sharing how this pandemic has affected students around the world. And that can be a life-changing experience. Just the fact that they have the opportunity to communicate with and become friends with other students, peers in a different country and in a city as far away as Bukhara, Uzbekistan. So of course, your generosity tonight will also help supply even more needs-based students with laptops, software, college application assistance. When we started the Fellows program about 4 years ago, we had one student. Now we have 30, and we hope to have 60 next year. And that one student, due to the help that she was able to get from us, applied to and was accepted by a major college on the East Coast in Massachusetts. And of course, she had the ability and talent herself, but part of what made that possible was opening her eyes through the CIR fellowship. So what better way is there for us to invest in the future than by opening the eyes and expanding the minds of our community's youth to the world outside Santa Fe, outside New Mexico, and even outside the United States. Now, in addition to our student programs, we also have an international visitor program, and we have substantial community education, as Sandy told you, so far this year, or since the pandemic, over 100 live streams. So let's hear from some of our members about what CIR means to them.
What I really love about CIR is not only the way it engages students, but the fact that it really does connect the community to the world.
It's special to Santa Fe. You've got not just world-class presenters, myself excluded, but you've also got world-class audiences, people from all walks of life, and the symbiosis between those two groups.
The thing that I really appreciate about about CIR is the Journalism Under Fire conference.
When I was a student at Santa Fe High School, I was an intern with CIR, and it was my gateway to the world as a student.
They bring the world to Santa Fe and connect us in ways that I think are really profound. I've met so many strong women leaders from around the world.
It gives us a great and direct tie to all of those nations, regions, people, and cultures that we have so enjoyed.
One of the things I love about CIR is all of the incredible, interesting, intelligent, wonderful people that are members of this organization.
I called my friend Issa from Cameroon on the phone and said, you got to get down here and talk to this guy. And the two of them made a connection over lunch. And, you know, this is how things happen. You know, you invite people, you get them to talk to each other, and magic happens and new initiatives happen. And so that was like a beautiful moment.
It's been really an adventure and so much fun.
And what CIR does for high school students is just absolutely phenomenal.
I'm a big fan of CIR. CIR has meant a lot to me. It's played a big role in my life in Santa Fe and made Santa Fe feel like home.
I miss you all. I look forward to seeing you in the future.
I'm going to be engaged with CIR on a lot of different levels for a lot of years.
I'm so grateful that I get to be a public servant in my own town and with the people that I love the most, and get to enjoy that with the folks who we continue to invite into our community.
And I think it's just amazing.
Through CIR, I really feel that my life journey, Santa Fe's community journey, and the future of our students all comes together beautifully, seamlessly, and with a great inspiration. I love CIR.
Thank you, Richard. I love watching Richard say that. He's a great member of our board, a former Foreign Service officer, and have been a wonderful addition to us, to CIR. Of course, I don't need to remind you that your gift is tax deductible if you itemize your deductions. But if, like me, you're lucky enough to be 70 and a half and older, you can make a direct gift from your IRA. And indeed, one of our donors has already done that. Thank you very much. And trust me, if you use the IRA route, you won't even feel it. And it won't be added to your taxable income, and will go towards satisfying those pesky required minimum distributions that we are required to make. In all, it is such a deal. It's called a qualified charitable donation, or a QCD. And if you want to use your IRA to make a QCD, then call one of the numbers on the screen, 505-982-4931 or 505-585-4774, and make a pledge with one of our team members who will answer. And then somebody from our staff will follow up with you in the next day or so and make sure that it all gets properly done. It is a wonderful thing, and I am so pleased to know about it and to use it regularly myself. So what about all of us who are RPCVs, Returned Peace Corps volunteers? I see one from Linda Barker about giving donor. She was in Rwanda from 1988 to 1990. There are a lot of Returned Peace Corps volunteers on this call. I was Eastern Caribbean 6, 1969 to 72, in the small island of Grenada that nobody had ever heard of until Ronald Reagan made it famous, unfortunately. And I'm sure there are many others. So make a donation and tell us where you served. The connection between Peace Corps and CIR has been strong. We've supplied Peace Corps volunteers to the schools to, in fact, try to interest students in Peace Corps. So Texting 44321, type in Global Youth and send, follow the prompts. Go to sfcir.org/gala-donate or call 505-982-4931 or 505-585-4774. If you use the phone option, please be patient as we may be talking to other possible donors, and leave a message and we'll get right back to you. Now, finally, let me announce that we've made the $3,000 pledge. That is fantastic. And now I've just been advised we have another $1,500 pledge that has come in that we would like to double. So if you haven't yet had the opportunity to make a contribution, you can still double it with our new $1,500 matching grant. Now, I want to just remind everybody that we're just right now within a minute or so of moving on to our special guests, Director Comey and Valerie Plame, and the texting option, the website option, and the phones will all be available during that time and afterwards. So please take the opportunity as you're listening to that fantastic conversation to proceed and to make another and to make your gift. So with that, I'm now going to turn it back to Sandy. Sandy, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you for leading us once again through a paddle call. Thank you all out there for your amazing support of our programs. We couldn't do this without you, truly. So we will give an update on how donations are rolling just before the audience Q&A, which will be in about 40 minutes. Our lines are open, as we've talked about. Please make a donation. We would love to keep our program as strong as we can. And of course, if you'd rather focus on the conversation upcoming and do a donation later, our lines will be open into the night. So with all of this now said, I would love right now to bring in our two keynote speakers, Director Jim Comey and Valerie Plame. Good evening, Director Comey. It's great to see you.
Great to be with you.
And of course, Valerie, welcome back, Valerie. We're just always delighted to have you on the CIR stage. So let me quickly read some bios and then I'm going to turn the conversation over. Let me remind everyone out there that we will go to an audience Q&A right after this conversation. So please enter your questions in the Q&A bar, not in the chat window, and we'll get to them when the time comes. So James Comey served as director of the FBI from 2013 to 2017, appointed to the post by President Barack Obama. He previously served as U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York and the U.S. Deputy Attorney General in the administration of President George W. Bush. His first book, A Higher Loyalty, was a #1 New York Times bestseller and the basis for the Showtime limited series, The Comey Rule, which you should all watch. And his second book, which I hope all of you have received so far, and if not, it's on its way, is Saving Justice, Truth, Transparency, and Trust. It was published in January. I just finished it last night. It's fantastic. And he's currently working at Columbia University Law School as a senior research scholar and leader in residence. And then Valerie Plame is a writer, spy novelist, and former CIA officer. As a subject of the 2003 Plame affair, also known as the CIA leak scandal, her identity as a CIA officer was exposed. The Department of Justice ordered a criminal investigation into this, which was, of course, overseen by the DOJ's new Deputy Attorney General, one James B. Comey. Valerie's spoken for CIR on many occasions, and we're thrilled to welcome you back to the CIR stage, Valerie. And let me now turn everything over to you.
Thank you so much, Sandy, and thank you to the Santa Fe Council on International Relations. Thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for supporting this event. It's a bit strange to consider that we've thought quite a bit about each other, but have never actually met. So I'd like to begin with your book, Saving Justice, Truth, Transparency, and Trust. It came out last year. It is fantastic. You talk about fascinating cases and lessons from your long and storied career to illuminate the federal justice system. And for you, as the title says, truth and transparency are absolutely essential to the foundation of our judicial system. And you wrote about a case that came up early in your career. You were a lawyer in the Southern District of New York, and there was a mobster Sammy the Bull Gravano, and he was a cooperating witness to get an even bigger mobster, John Gotti. As the government witness who was needed to convict Gotti, Sammy the Bull was afforded some respect and given some very small gifts that he requested: handball gloves, reading glasses, and a cheap FBI gift shop watch. You were obligated to tell the defense about any gifts which might undercut the credibility of the witness by exposing bias or special treatment. And the FBI office who was handling Sammy was furious. They thought it would make them look really bad if they mentioned this at trial. Still, during the trial, you asked Sammy if the government had given him any personal items. He mentioned the watch, he mentioned the reading glasses, but he did not mention the handball gloves. You know, total value of all these is probably less than $75. You wrote in your book about being a coward and leaving that out during the trial. 3 decades later, you still feel guilt about it. Why is that?
Well, I do. Let me first thank you, Valerie, for doing this. We have thought a lot about each other, and I ordered an investigation into the outing of your identity, and yet we've never met, still haven't met in person. So thank you for doing this. Thank you for your service to this country. Thank you to all the people of CIR for the good that you do and the good you've done for our country. I'm married to a former Peace Corps volunteer who strongly encouraged me to do this, and I'm so glad she did. So here's the reason that I still feel badly about that 30 years ago. My client, when I was a federal prosecutor, was not a person. It wasn't my boss, Rudy Giuliani, who was kind of different, at least in my sense back in the day, or even an office, the Southern District of New York, or even the Department of Justice. My client was an idea justice. My job was to try to make sure that the right thing happened. And yeah, I ran into a lot of resistance from the FBI, from the witness himself, about my proposal to be transparent, fully transparent with the court and the jury, because it would embarrass them. And actually, the gloves weren't what they worried about the most. It was the watch, because it had the FBI seal on it that it was a cheapo watch, but it had been given to the underboss of the Gambino crime family by the head of the FBI in New York to thank him for his work. And all I let the jury know is that he'd been given a watch, not the circumstances, not the pomp and ceremony around the leader of the FBI thanking this mass murderer. And that was wrong. That betrayed my client, this idea. It pleased the people who thought they were my clients, right? The agents around me, but it was wrong. And I was too young to stand up straight and do the right thing. And I regret it. And I told the story because I'm trying to illustrate one of the core values of being a lawyer for the government is knowing who your client is, that your obligation is to a thing above, not to the angry faces around you.
Thanks, Jim. Can you speak about any similarities between the mafia's so-called ethics code of honor and the Trump administration?
Yeah, actually, the first time I met Donald Trump, this idea of Cosa Nostra, the mafia, which I'd spent a lot of time thinking about and investigating, popped into my head sitting around a conference table with the leaders of the intelligence community trying to brief the president-elect and his team about what Russia had done to us and about the continuing threat. And the entire conversation turned into a focus on the boss. What could be said that would make him look good? Nothing about the country, nothing about dealing with the threat. What can we say about me? And in that moment, I had this flashback to Cosa Nostra. And I thought it was so dramatic, so emotional that I pushed it away. I thought that's nutty. And it kept coming back and coming back and coming back. And there was a reason that I was feeling this. It's the same kind of leadership. The boss is only about himself. Every underling is judged only by what they bring to the boss, the loyalty they pay to the boss, the money they pay to the boss. And there's nothing above. There's no considerations of higher values or norms or tradition or history, even the country. It's about me. What can you do to me? How are you going to wet my beak with me as the boss of this family? The feeling was the same. And I hope most Americans who choose to see actually can now see the similarity.
Right. So it sounds like your deep knowledge of the mafia really did inform how you dealt with or viewed Trump. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, it showed me right away that this was going to be very, very difficult, and that I was dealing with someone unlike anybody else that I had ever heard of holding that office, a person without external reference points, whose only reference point is the hole in himself, this craving for affirmation that dominates every conversation. And I knew it was going to be very difficult to protect the institution I led, which the American people since Watergate have not wanted to be part of filling a craving for affirmation by the president, but instead finding out what is true, regardless of who the subjects of the investigation are. So I knew it was going to be a nightmare. It was actually a shorter nightmare than I expected, but it was every bit as dark.
Indeed. Thank you, Jim. Let's move on to the Clinton investigation. Please help us to understand why the FBI investigation into the Clinton email case was made public, while the arguably even more alarming investigation, at least from a national security perspective, into the 2016 Russian interference in the US presidential election was not made public.
Yeah, it's a really important question. And actually the treatment of the two different cases illustrates the rule, which I think we stuck to pretty consistently. The Clinton case came to us publicly. There was a referral from the Inspector General from the State Department and from the intelligence community, alerting us that the Secretary may have mishandled classified information when she was Secretary of State. So the world knew that had been sent to the FBI. But even though it had come to us publicly, we still wouldn't talk about it for months afterwards. And finally, we, meaning me and the Attorney General, decided that we needed to rely on the exception to the Department of Justice's normal policy that we don't talk about investigations, that is designed to address cases of intense public interest, where we really need to assure people this is being handled in a responsible way. And so we did that about 3 months, maybe 4 months after we opened the case. And then we said nothing about it until it was done, or we thought it was done, a whole nother nightmare. But we didn't speak about it until the end of the investigation. And then we offered transparency. I, in particular, offered transparency about why there was no basis for criminal charges. So that's a normal approach to an investigation, except because there was such public interest, the candidates were talking about it, the press was talking about it, that we decided we had to confirm that we were doing it, and that's the end of it. The investigation of Russia's possible connection to Americans associated with the Trump campaign was very different. It came to us secretly. It came to us as a classified investigation. There's no serious impediment to say anything about it. It also wasn't focused on the candidate. That's what people often forget. We weren't investigating Donald Trump. In the other investigation, a criminal unclassified investigation, that was of the candidate. This one was about people around the candidate to see if there was anything to the smoke we saw. And we didn't know whether there was anything to it at all. And so I honestly don't remember any conversation about whether we should disclose something about it, because we were just starting. It was classified. It wasn't about the candidate in particular, and we didn't know whether there was anything there. If we had said something about it, we might have alerted people we were coming for them, or we might have unfairly smeared them. And so the decision was made really unconsciously, because it was so obvious to us that we need to figure out whether there's something to this. And we actually didn't talk about it until the following year, in the spring of 17, when I got approval to confirm it existed, and royally pissed off Donald Trump by doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, terrible options all the way around. So on July 5th, 2016, you announced that the FBI was closing the case on Clinton emails. And then in a major plot turn on October 26, you informed Congress that the FBI was reopening the investigation because of hundreds of thousands of emails found on Anthony Weiner's laptop. Weiner was being investigated for sexting with a minor and was married to Huma Abedin, a top aide for Hillary Clinton. Jim, do you have any idea how those hundreds of thousands of emails ended up on Weiner's laptop?
A little bit now. I think a lot of them were forwarded by Secretary Clinton's aide, Huma Abedin, to her husband's laptop so he could print them for her. And then a fair number of them, I think probably the majority of them, were automatically backed up to the laptop. I'm not gonna be able to explain this well, but they had kind of a family plan. And so her BlackBerry, Huma Abedin's, was linked to that laptop. And so tens of thousands of emails from her BlackBerry, many, many, many of which, as you said, hundreds of thousands, were Secretary Clinton's emails to her, on which Huma Abedin was copied, ended up on Weiner's laptop. You can't make it up.
Oof. Which led to, the family plan led to extraordinarily painful dilemmas for you and your team. Can you open a window for us. What were you looking at in just the weeks before the 2016 election?
Yeah, speaking of nightmares, we finished the Clinton investigation, as you said, or thought we did, in the beginning of July of 2016. And I was so relieved that we had completed it, that we had offered details to the American people about what we had found and why it didn't rise to the level of a prosecution. The major hole in the case, which worked obviously to Secretary Clinton's great benefit, is that there wasn't substantial evidence that when she mishandled classified information, and she mishandled a ton of it by discussing both top secret and secret stuff on an unclassified system, there wasn't substantial proof that she knew she was doing something she shouldn't be doing. There wasn't proof that it went beyond real carelessness. And so that made it fairly easy. We were done. We moved on to trying to figure out what the heck's going on with Russia and this election. And then on October 27th, less than 2 weeks before the election, I walked into my conference room and my team told me about this slimy guy's laptop and said there are hundreds of thousands of Secretary Clinton's emails on that laptop. And that number blew me away because we had only ever found thousands, I forget the number, but 6,000 of Hillary Clinton's emails. And that was the basis on which we did the review and concluded there wasn't evidence that she knew she was doing something wrong. So now they're telling me there's hundreds of thousands. And then they rocked me back even further. They said, we think we may have found the missing BlackBerry emails because Secretary Clinton had used a BlackBerry to do unclassified emails before she transitioned to the server in her basement, which became infamous. And remember what I said, the hole in the case was no proof that she knew she was doing stuff she shouldn't do. But if there was such proof, where would it be? Likely at the beginning, when maybe she sent an email on her BlackBerry and someone sent one back saying, hey, boss, you can't talk about that kind of stuff on an unclassified system. And so the team said to me, there's tens of thousands of Clinton BlackBerry emails on Anthony Weiner's laptop. We think the result of this could change based on our review of that. And I then said, okay, how fast can you review these? And they said, we can't possibly finish it before the election because it's not like looking for a gun in a hayfield. We need to have people searching who know what they're looking for. And there's actually only about half a dozen of us who have the background to read through all the emails and see if there's new classified information or indications of intent. And so I said, okay, now what do I do? And in that moment, I could see two norms just crashing into each other. One is obvious that I still believe in passionately. If you can avoid it, you take no action in the government investigative roles that might have an impact on an election, whether that's dog catcher or president of the United States. That's a really important norm. If you can avoid it, you take no action. Second, if you make a representation under oath and you learn that it's not true, you correct it. I had spent all summer, as had the Attorney General, telling Congress and the American people, we're done here, go away. There's nothing to this. It's over. Here's the reason. I gave tremendous transparency and I got the daylights beat out of me for that transparency, but it was to show the American people this thing is over, and I defended the work. Now I'm sitting there on October 27th and my team's telling me not only is it not over, the result may change. And so what do I do? As between those two, one sucks a whole lot more. Speaking was terrible because it could have an impact on the election, but not speaking would be an act of concealment that would defraud the American people, in my view, far, far worse than speaking. And so that choice was actually not all that hard. I offered the Attorney General the chance to weigh in on the decision, and she said she didn't wish to speak to me about it, although she was against it. And so I knew I was going to take this hit, and I took it. And look, if I had a magic wand, I wouldn't have been involved at all. I'd go back and change that. But there we were in the end of a game with the whistle in our mouths. We had to make a call. And even in hindsight, we made the right call. And if people really care about this, dig into it and go back to that moment and ask yourself, so what would I have done? Not knowing the future, you can't know the future. Based on what you know then, which is the least bad of those options? Do you speak or do you conceal? And I actually don't see it as a serious choice.
Yeah, brutal.
And they finished the work. The other thing that surprised me is one of the reasons they said they couldn't do it before the election was that we didn't have software that could deduplicate on a classified network. And folks who haven't worked in the government may not get this distinction, but classified networks are standalone networks, and you just can't put normal civil litigation software on them. And we didn't have dedupe software for our classified network. Turns out the geniuses in our labs built it over a few days, and they were able to deduplicate and cut it down to just thousands instead of hundreds of thousands. They found lots of classified emails, no new information, and nothing to change their view of her intent. Then they came back to me the Sunday before the election and said, we finished. Doesn't change our view. And I said, well, I got to tell Congress again. And I did. And then I went and had a huge margarita.
Or two, maybe. Sandy had spoken about the movie The Comey Rules, which I saw as well in preparation for this event. It's excellent, and it really dramatizes the weeks, what you're talking about, leading up to the election. And you're getting all this conflicting advice from your FBI team. These people are patriotic, they are really smart, they're experienced, and they disagree violently with each other sometimes on some of these issues. So my question to you is, can you share with us briefly the process? How do you reach your decisions? You've got your team around the table, you trust them, you've been in the trenches with them, and they're saying, no, boss, you're crazy. You can't do that. How do you come to something that feels like a decision you can live with?
It's a great question. I think the most important thing I did was spend 4 years trying to flatten the hill. All leaders sit at the top of a hill from the people they lead, and the FBI's hill is incredibly steep, actually steeper than the CIA's in my experience. The director of the FBI, because the first director was Hoover for 50 years, is this revered figure. People rise, they dress up, they speak with a tight throat when they speak to the director. And that's a recipe for not hearing the truth, especially about yourself when you're at the top of the hill. So I spent 4 years trying to flatten that hill and get to a place where they, of course, respected me, but where they would tell me when I was full of crap or when I was missing something. And by the time these nightmares hit us, the hill wasn't flat. No hill's ever flat, but it was pretty darn flat, where people would say, we'd have these family food fights about hard issues. Yeah. There was actually less disagreement in the Clinton case than is portrayed in the movie. I guess you needed some drama for that. They captured the feeling of these folks. They didn't care about my rank and my privilege. They wanted to bat around and argue over important issues. But I'll tell you, this issue of the hundreds of thousands of Hillary's emails appearing on Weiner's laptop was such a huge thing that I wouldn't let them discuss it initially as a family. I told the 10 of them, 12 of them, look, here's what we're gonna do, go away, go for a walk, and then meet me back here in an hour. Because I was worried that it was so overwhelming that it might be an impediment to really good family discussions. Everybody took a break and then came back, and then we hashed it out and got to a place where everybody said, look, this is awful, but you can't conceal this and still expect the FBI to survive as an institution. And they also discussed whether we should consider that we might have an impact on the election that would help elect Donald Trump president of the United States. One of my very best people, a woman named Tricia Anderson, asked that question, and it sucked the air out of the room. And I thanked her for asking it. And then I said, I can't ever consider whose political fortunes will be affected in what way, because down that path is the death of the FBI. I have to ask, what's the right thing to do, given our values, given our traditions, given the law? I can't, look, I don't want Donald Trump to be president of the United States, but I can't be on anybody's team. But the fact that she would ask that question in the group and confront me with it was a great sign that the family was working as we hoped it would.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jim. Those are lessons of leadership for sure. Let's turn now to Trump's connections to Russia. And I would say a cottage industry has sprung up to try to explain Trump's reluctance to criticize Putin and Russia's policies. Trump's 2018 press conference with Putin in Helsinki was nothing short of shocking to millions of Americans. Craig Unger's book, American Compromat, which came out this year, makes a case that Trump was recruited by the Russians years ago and served as their agent of influence, term of art. Since then, do you think that's plausible?
Yeah, I think it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be so, but you have to leave your mind open to that as a reasonable possibility. It's hard to explain his conduct otherwise, and not just his public conduct. But I was always struck, again, during my 4 or 5 months with him, that he wouldn't criticize Vladimir Putin even in private. I mean, maybe you can construct an argument that I have to suck up to Putin because I'm playing some strategic game, which I don't buy. But even in private, with nobody around, he wouldn't criticize Putin. That's hard to explain exactly. And so I don't know. And I don't know whether the compromat stuff is true. I don't know whether the stuff about, you know, the activities with prostitutes in Moscow is true. I actually think it's more likely true today than when I first heard the information, because of some other facts that have been developed and laid out by the Senate Intelligence Committee. But I don't know the answer to it. And I'd love to know, but I'd also love as an American to be able to say, nah, that's crazy. That can't possibly be so. That the president of the United States was somehow under the influence of a hostile state. Now that's crazy. I can't say that.
No. It's almost inexplicable, except with that as a possibility, but that's a whole other conversation another time. Let me take you to security versus privacy in a democracy. You've had a ringside seat to many pivotal moments in US history pertaining to these issues of privacy. For example, you write about the unprecedented situation in 2004 when you raced to the bedside of seriously ill Attorney General John Ashcroft because the Bush White House was seeking his signature to reauthorize the NSA warrantless domestic surveillance wiretapping program named Stellar Winds. The DOJ had ruled, hey, this is unconstitutional. So there you are in practically a cinematic scene. You are racing up the hospital steps to beat White House officials who are pressuring Ashcroft, almost unconscious, to sign the papers. Crazy, crazy scene. And then in 2013, you were the FBI director when the whole Ed Snowden case broke and all of that. So the question is this: can you please speak to your outlook about the appropriate balance in a democracy between privacy and security that those two cases exemplify?
Yeah, hard question, Valerie. Thanks for that. There's no clear answer to that question, except that the antidote to government overreach, to well-meaning people in the government going too far in pursuing security at the expense of privacy, is transparency, maximum transparency. The challenge is, in the classified world, where the activities you're engaged in, if they became public, would aid the nation's enemies, violent enemies in many cases, you can't offer that kind of transparency. And so people need to ask, so what's the proxy for transparency? How is this behavior overseen? How is it checked? How is the Leviathan roped down in this situation? Because there's genius and comfort in that constraint and oversight. And so, look, I've been excoriated by the Inspector General at various times. He's a royal pain in my rear end. He's a wonderful pain in everybody's rear end because he is a rope over the Leviathan. Oversight by Congress consumes tremendous amounts of time. And one of the things the Republicans made an enormous mistake by slashing, starting in Newt Gingrich's era, critically important, because Congress, and especially the staff members, are seeing things and questioning things in a very different way. The role of judiciary, especially when it comes to the FBI's work, is also critical. And so I could go on, but you want to always ask, can I get direct transparency to give me comfort? Or is there a proxy for transparency? It's never enough. I can remember people saying to me when we were debating in the early days, the Patriot Act, and people would say, you seem like a good guy. And I'd say, look, I am a good guy, I think, but you should not trust me. But you should want to know, how am I overseen? What is the structure? What are the ropes that hold him down? Because a government that depends solely on the character of its people is in for a very rough ride, because you're going to have people who lack character in positions that could deeply affect your privacy. And so that's what I tell people. Demand to know what the direct transparency is or the proxy for transparency, so that we can be reasonably assured that we're able to balance these two things. That's probably my best answer.
Well, I hope I someday have the opportunity to speak more to about that. That dilemma captures me. But let me move on to something called Plamegate. We talked about in the introduction how we thought so much about each other without ever actually meeting. And what's that referring to was your position as Deputy Attorney General. I was outed by senior White House officials in 2003 in the Bush White House. I was outed as a covert CIA operative. And because Attorney General Ashcroft had recused himself, you were acting, and then you turned and appointed your friend, former colleague, Patrick Fitzgerald, as a special counsel. I think you told Pat it would be over in 6 months. 4 years later, the Vice President's Chief of Staff, Scooter Libby, was convicted on 4 out of 5 counts pertaining to the leak of my name. How do you view that saga now?
Well, I deeply regret what happened to you. I can't imagine the pain that you and the people close to you have been through since then. It just, yeah, there's nothing more to say about that. I'm just really sorry about that. I think the Department of Justice conducted itself in a great way. And I advised Attorney General Ashcroft that he had to recuse himself, not because he was compromised in some way that would work to the disadvantage of the department, but because people might reasonably think that. He had run for office, and Karl Rove, who was the chief political advisor to President George W. Bush and one of the suspects in the leak, had run his campaign. And so I told him, you can't be part of this. And then once he stepped aside and I was in charge, I appointed a special prosecutor. Again, not because I didn't trust the lawyers in the Department of Justice to do it in a good way, but because I thought the American people have to believe this is being done in a good way. Mm-hmm. And so we need to move this away from Washington, right? The higher level political appointees need to turn it over to someone with the reputation and the reality that is Pat Fitzgerald. He does not give a rip about politics, and then let him go find out what is true. And that will make whatever result he comes up with. If he decides to prosecute Bush officials, that'll be more credible. If he decides not to, that'll be more credible. And it took much longer than I expected because there was a whole lot more obstruction of justice than I ever expected by senior people, including bizarre behavior by journalists who refused to cooperate with an investigation for reasons that don't make any sense to me even many years later. But in the end, I think the right result was reached. Now, pause. Even President George W. Bush refused to pardon Scooter Libby. He commuted his sentence. Okay, he didn't have to go to jail, but he left the felony convictions in place because he thought the facts warranted the felony conviction. And then Donald Trump became president and started pardoning people. I don't want to make the world all about me, but maybe it's about Pat, who started pardoning all the significant people that Pat had prosecuted. Rod Blagojevich, Conrad Black, and Scooter Libby. And that is disgusting.
But why?
The department did it well.
People have asked me that many, many times. I don't have a good answer. Why do you think Trump pardoned Libby?
I think because Libby had become a cause celeb in kind of the nutty Wall Street Journal editorial page crowd. And so that led people to want to talk to Donald Trump. And it wouldn't surprise me, though, if people knew the way Trump operates and didn't go to the merits, but said, you know, that bastard Comey is the one who's responsible for Scooter Libby being convicted and his buddy Fitzgerald. I suspect Rod Blagojevich made a similar argument. Conrad Black made a similar argument. I don't know that. And again, I don't want to make the world about me. When it comes to Donald Trump, knowing how he feels about me, it's not crazy to make it a little bit about me. I don't think it's about you, Valerie.
Oh, there's so many things I could say, but I'll move on to actually a very serious topic that I feel passionately about and our country's role in this, and that's torture. Can you please speak about the differences that you perceive them to be in cultures between CIA and the FBI, and how that difference may have allowed torture to be conducted by the CIA, while the FBI interrogation techniques are perhaps more persuasive and nonviolent?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And I have an answer, but my answer is necessarily limited because I don't know the CIA culture well enough, so you'll have to check me on this. The cool thing about the CIA's culture compared to the FBI's is it's much flatter. I once spoke at a graduation ceremony at the farm, and I afterwards there was a beer and wine reception. Everybody just mingled. Another thing that doesn't happen at the FBI. And somebody came walking up to me and said, Director Comey, are you going back to headquarters after this? It was a CIA employee. And I said, yeah, my plane's right outside. And she said, I baked these cookies for a friend of mine at headquarters. Could you take them to her? And her name was written on it. And I said, yeah, I don't know her. And she said, oh, but you can find her. And I said, okay. I'll take the cookies. Now, it may have been she was trying to recruit me or something, but no one at the FBI would approach the director of another agency and ask them to take cookies back to headquarters. I thought that was a great thing. On the flip side, one of the really great things about the FBI's culture is that it's rule bound, and its focus is entirely on the US Constitution and domestic law. Right? The FBI is, and maybe it's one of its weaknesses, at its heart a law enforcement organization where the people think about judges constantly and what will be said about this in a courtroom. And so when it comes to interrogation, first of all, there's also a difference when it comes to interrogation. The FBI's business is interrogation, questioning people to get information. It's very different in the CIA. I'm sure you can say more about this than I can. It's not about custodial interrogation in the way it is in the FBI. The FBI, you arrest people, you try and get them to cooperate. Very, very different emphasis on that in the CIA, in my experience. And so you put those together and you have a situation where the FBI was deeply uncomfortable being part of interrogations that involve techniques that would go beyond US criminal law and the Constitution. And it's the reason that then Director Mueller said, not going to be part of it, and pulled our people out of that, which was in a way, which was both the right thing to do and in a way unfortunate, because maybe the FBI could have stopped some of the worst if they were still in the room.
Thank you. That sounds right to me. And it's a painful episode that our country still has not come to terms with. I'm keeping an eye on the clock, so I think we maybe have time for 2 more questions before we open it up. I want to ask you about the imposter syndrome that you write about. This is more on the personal side of things, or leadership style. So unusually for a man who's been in many positions as you have been of real influence, of power, you have written and spoken at length about the imposter syndrome you sometimes feel and its importance to good leadership. Can you please explain more how that comes to you? I think we all feel it at certain times. It's unusual for a person in your sort of positions that you've held through the years to admit to it.
Yeah, look, the imposter syndrome, as you said, is the idea that all of us feel, I know I do, that if you really knew me, if you knew me the way I know me, you would think less of me. And all of us, I hope, have that to one degree or another. It's really only complete jerks that don't have that. But a lot of people with power and money become complete jerks, because the challenge of having power and money is you're in that position and you have cognitive dissonance, because part of you knows, how the hell did I get in this position? How did I end up with all this money? It was fortune, it was luck. But people deal with that often by suppressing it and convincing themselves that they earned all this money or they earned all this power. So this sort of this razor's edge divides people. Some become complete jerks. Others remain a sense of, it really is luck that I ended up as a rich guy or ended up in this position. I've always been in that second camp, maybe in part because I got the jobs I got. They sure struck me as accidents. I became U.S. Attorney in New York because the Republicans and Democrats were fighting after 9/11 over who would be the U.S. Attorney. And I was the relationship that everybody settled for. Right? I was in Richmond, Virginia. And then I became Deputy Attorney General. I get thrown into all these weird situations. And I assumed that was the end of my government career. The Bush administration hated me because of the fights I had, especially with Dick Cheney. But it turned out that that was exactly what Barack Obama was looking for. And so I didn't apply to be FBI director. They called me out of the blue and asked me to come down from Connecticut, where I was living, and interview for the job. So it's actually easier for me to convince myself, because it's fact-based, that I ended up in these positions largely by fortune. And I think that's a very good posture to be in, because it makes it easier for you to flatten the hill. The only person who can flatten the hill is the person at the top, because there's an imposter complex both at the bottom of the hill by the people who work for you. They're terrified of being exposed or damaged by you, and at the top of the hill. And if anyone's going to flatten the hill, it's got to be my job. And having a sense that I'm just this kid from Yonkers, New York, who ended up in these positions makes it easier to flatten that hill. But I have met a lot of people who decide to go the other way. You know, my stuff don't stink, and I'm here because the people finally recognized how great I am, and I'm wealthy because I'm smarter than everybody else. Oh, gosh.
I love that expression, flatten the hill. Okay, last two questions. We spoke about the movie The Comey Rule, and as I watched it, I experienced my own little bit of PTSD of going through where you're just going through the public meat grinder. And a personal question, I'm curious, did the movie get right the emotional pain of your wife, your daughters, is they see their beloved father and husband, just being beat up every single day. Your wife clearly had her own political viewpoint on the world. How did the movie capture that, underplay it, overdo it? What?
I think the movie, Billy Ray, the writer and director, got it exactly right in a way that I didn't fully appreciate. I found watching it very emotional because I don't think I fully appreciated the pain that my situation was causing the people who loved me most. And Jennifer Ely is a gifted actor, and she captured my wife. If you've seen that movie, you know my wife, Patrice, and captured that in a way that at the time I don't think I fully got. So the answer is yes, which is one of the things that makes it so hard for me to watch it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I hear you. And last one, before we open up to all the participants here this evening, you saw at the top of the show all these fantastic high school students that are just raring to go out into the world and learn more, and they have curiosity. I love what CIR does, putting this emphasis on opening up that door for young people to step through. What would you say to a young person interested in a career in law enforcement, national security, diplomacy? And I get asked this a lot myself, and because we're in such a chaotic situation right now, the answer doesn't come as easily as it did before. But what would you say, and what would you advise, and what should they perhaps focus on?
I would tell them to try to remember what wealth really is. Albert Einstein used to tell young people, try not to become people of success, try to become people of value. And the challenge of being a talented young person is the siren song of success. Nice houses, nice cars, plaques on the wall can be very attractive and can cause you to go in directions where you will not end this life with true wealth. You will not have been a person of value. And value is in the difference you make for the people who need you. The cool thing about CIR is it gets that, and it's made up of a huge number of people who've devoted their lives to being people of value. Be those kind of people. You will not sit at the end of your life and talk about your car or your house or the plaques on your wall. You will tell your children and your grandchildren about the difference you made with people who needed you somewhere around the world or in a corner of New Mexico. All the rest is just smoke that gets in the way. So blow the smoke away early and figure out, who do you want to have been? What do you want to talk about at the end of this life? And that'll help you become a person of value. And we need you. So get out there. And I always tell young people, yeah, we've screwed it up. Fix it. I'm optimistic because of you. Get out there and make this world a better place.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Jim. And I'll turn it back over to you, Sandy.
Thank you. Thank you. That was extremely well put. We have a number of questions from the audience, which I'm going to get to in a second. And just before I do that, here's another reminder to just show folks the ways in which they can contribute tonight. And then I'm going to pull up a fancy little graphic showing how far we've done at our in-gala giving, and then I'll show the total at the end of the night. So here we are with our in-gala giving. We have a fancy little number streaking along. So yes, tonight so far we've raised $31,591 just from folks giving during this conversation and before. So thank you so much. We have made the last challenge match of 1,500. So again, thank you folks out there. This is just fantastic. So a number of questions out there. I'm definitely going to abuse my moderator chair for a second and ask a question that I have. And this, a couple of my questions came from reading this book, Saving Justice, which I really think needs to be required reading for law school students and really all of us, for a lot of the different themes that you touch on and of course the stories you tell. But let's talk about the Mueller report for a minute. given some of your strong and I think absolutely correct assertions about that report and the context around that report, if you'd been Mueller, if you'd been your predecessor at the FBI and the special counsel, what would you have done differently in the execution and then, the communication of that report?
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. Look, I'm going to answer it, even though I've been the victim of a lot of people offering hindsight judgments on me. I'm going to offer one on my friend, Bob Mueller. I thought the work he did and the people he assembled did was extraordinary. I would have done, in the main, two things differently. He tried to be both fair and principled, which is who Bob Mueller is to his core. He was reluctant to accuse the president of the crime of obstruction of justice if the president couldn't be indicted for that crime. He reasoned that it would be unfair, that Department of Justice policy, which I get he was bound by, and I accept that, but that it would be unfair to accuse him of a crime for which he couldn't seek vindication through a trial as president. And so he tried to thread a needle. He laid out the facts that were relevant to the issues of obstruction of justice. And then he stopped with this formulation saying, we're not saying he did it, basically, we're not saying he didn't do it. If we could conclude he didn't commit obstruction, we would say so. That approach left it open to being distorted by cynical people like former Attorney General Bill Barr and the president, who were then able to say, see, no obstruction, no collusion, let's move on. I think what I would have done is laid it out and then reached a conclusion. The president can seek vindication after he leaves office if he wants to be indicted. But by trying to do the fair and principled thing, he confused the American people. And in a way, I don't want to be defending Donald Trump, but I will. He slimed Donald Trump because fair-minded people, thousands of former prosecutors reading that report, said the guy committed obstruction of justice. And so Bob didn't accomplish the goal, so I would have approached it differently. Maybe most importantly, I would have communicated differently about the report. His report is a really compelling read. The problem is it's 468 pages long with more than 2,000 footnotes in Times New Roman, I think 10-point. Nobody read it, or very few people read it. So I think I would have found a better way to communicate the conclusions to the American people, both in writing and orally. I know how much Bob Mueller hated testifying, but he had a duty to represent justice to the American people because the Attorney General wasn't going to do it. And Congress extended an invitation to him, and the Attorney General said, fine. And Bob pulled up short and then testified in a very sparse way. That's not good enough, honestly. When you represent this client of justice, you have an obligation to be transparent, even though you're uncomfortable in a public setting. Without the details, the American people can't know what is true, what is fair, what is correct.
That's very well put. Well, and carrying with that theme, you write in the final chapter of your book about what the next Attorney General of the United States needs to do to restore the trust of the American people in the Department of Justice and to help lift it, quote, above the partisan scrum. Now that we know the next AG is Merrick Garland, do you believe, especially in light of his partisan denial of a Supreme Court nomination hearing, that he is indeed the right person to take this forward?
I think he's the perfect person. I don't know him personally, but I know a lot about him, as I hope Americans do now as well. He is a principled person who was supported by Republicans and Democrats, even though the Republicans screwed him on the Supreme Court seat. And just the vote of so many Republicans voting for him to confirm him bears that out. So I think he has the history, the personality, the approach to be able to represent justice as an apolitical, nonpartisan organization, and to show the American people there really is a blindfold on Lady Justice. We're not going to be peeking out to see if the defendant or the person we're investigating is a friend of Joe Biden's or a friend of Donald Trump. We're going to do it in the right way. This is something an attorney general hasn't really needed to show since Edward Levy became Gerald Ford's attorney general after Watergate, which was the last time we needed to save the Department of Justice. So I think Merrick Garland is the right person. And again, I think he's not a public person by comfort. Hope he'll get out there. I'm not saying he has to go on The View or something, but he has to get out there and show himself and this institution to the American people, especially to help the millions of Americans who've been lied to about the FBI and the Department of Justice and internalize those lies from the president. He needs to help, just by who he is, coax them out of that fog of lies.
So let's go to the events of January 6th. And a comment here from Herb Thomas, who's a former board president of CIR, and he writes, your book extols the professionalism and nonpartisan dedication of Justice Department and FBI employees. There's evidence, however, that there are certainly some folks within that community that favor authoritarian, racist, and basically unfair government and law enforcement practices, all of which was well represented at the January 6th invasion of the Capitol. What can we do about this sort of hard right subculture within Justice Department or FBI or other government agencies?
Yeah, it's a really important question. I don't know that there's a significant portion of the FBI that represents that hard right subculture, but it doesn't matter because it's a significant part of law enforcement in general. We have 18,000 law enforcement organizations in the United States. There are hard right, white supremacist, let me go and attack the Capitol folks among those departments. And so two things have to be done. First, the FBI has to go find those who are violent actors or conspiring to be violent actors. The only way you de-radicalize a population is in three prongs. First, you go find the violent actors and you prosecute them. You got to lock them up. The second thing you do is push the chief radicalizer to the corner, which is actually happening with Donald Trump, thank goodness. And the third thing is you focus on the rest of the population and trying to lead them out of that fog of lies. I think there's a really important duty for the chiefs and the sheriffs overseeing those 18,000 law enforcement organizations to know your people. Know your people and know that people are attracted to law enforcement in a good way because they're people who respect authority. They're people who resonate strongly with themes about flag and country. But by virtue of that, there are also people who, when they internalize lies about election being stolen or about terrible things being done by the left, can move in an unhealthy direction. And so you got to start worrying about your people and then know them in a deep way, which is possible if you focus on it. Focus on getting out those that are bad and steering the culture in a healthy way with the rest of those who remain. But never convince yourself that I've got this. We don't have troubled people. You know, even in the FBI, like I said, I don't think it's a significant portion, but if I were director, I'd be wanting to know, so how do we know our people? And how can I assure Congress that I've got a grip on my own internal problem if there is one?
Well, and staying with that same theme, if you were, running FBI counterintelligence today, and this is a question from David, what would most worry you today, alongside some of those issues you just spoke to?
Well, the white supremacist threat worries me. It's been slowly growing. I felt it growing in 2016 and 17 before I was fired. Because all of you in this Zoom know this about America, we've always had a racist, misogynist, nativist, awful stew in this country, radioactive stew. We've done a pretty good job in my lifetime of pushing that stew into a containment building to keep the radiation in there, a containment building made up of law. But the most important feature of the containment strategy was cultural rods, lead rods that we pushed down into that stew of radiation to calm it. It wasn't okay in 2015 to start using racial epithets in a way that was very different in 1965 or 1975. Slowly, the culture pushed those control rods into that stew in lots of other ways. Donald Trump pulled them out. The dog whistles, the explicit endorsement of the good people on both sides of Charlottesville, that's the rods coming out. And so you start getting radiation banging all over the inside of that building. And then the president says the election's been stolen. Our identity's been stolen by all these brown people who are coming into this country. They're taking over, they're stealing things. And then you start knocking down walls of the containment building. So to deal with that, as the FBI, I'd want to make sure that I have the resources that I need, the laws that I need, and maybe most importantly, the culture and habits I need to start to restructure that building. The president and the rest of us are going to push the cultural rods back down in, but to make that building that contains it secure isn't enough to know I have the right laws and enough agents. Because I worry very much that there's a different mindset when it comes to investigating groups like this. And I'm not saying that it's a white identity affinity. I worry very much that we convince ourselves as investigators that because of the First Amendment, we have to be very careful with these groups in a way we don't with Islamist groups. We need to stare at whether that's true. And if it's true, figure out how we're going to change that. So if I were director, I'd want to know resources, laws, tools, and culture, and do I have those all aligned in the right way? And then to talk about counterintelligence, you obviously have a continuing threat from Russia, but in a way, the threat from Russia is a pimple on the threat from China, a rising China. A rising China is wonderful in many ways, and it's deeply, deeply concerning in other ways. That's going to dominate the next 3 or 4 directors' lives.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Let me change gears a little bit and ask a question to both you and Valerie. And Valerie mentioned this when she was talking with you. So you both have another thing in common, which is that Hollywood has portrayed your life stories, and you have seen actors playing you. So Valerie, you had Naomi Watts playing you in Fair Game. What was that like? Was that as surreal as I imagined it must be?
Yes. When you join the CIA in a covert capacity, that's not on the table. And it's nothing, honestly, if none of that had happened in 2003, I would be overseas now, hopefully, and chasing bad people with nuclear weapons. And I'd be perfectly happy that no one knew my name. It was so weird. It was an out-of-body experience. I bet Jim will say something the same because it's just so strange. And yet I was also pleased that the movie was well done and told the story.
So I share Valerie's sentiments. I wasn't covert, so I didn't face that, although I had no interest in being a B-list celebrity. I told Jeff Daniels, I just wish you could have acted taller. And I'd like to think I'm funnier than Jeff Daniels portrayed me, but his ability to capture with his face the way I was feeling, I was blown away by it. I went to Toronto one day and watched them film the dinner scene between me and Trump, and it left me feeling a little ill because it was so well done. And just with his expressions, he captured my fear for myself, but mostly for the organization and the country. So it was bizarre, weird, and in hindsight, I'm glad that we cooperated with them.
And that scene with Jeff Daniels playing you and the actor playing President Trump, if you haven't seen the Comey role, that scene alone is worth watching. And the look on Jeff Daniels' face is just quite something.
Yeah, and they did something else. They did something else that I didn't even notice how much it meant in capturing the scene. If you watch it, watch the lighting fade. They cut the lighting so slowly, you almost can't notice it until the end of the scene. The lights are just over the table. That actually captures the claustrophobia I felt by the end of that.
Sure. So I want to combine a couple questions from the audience here. And Jim, it's kind of exploring some of your inner workings. And so I'll ask 2 questions here. And this is first from Alan Stone. What's your personal moral compass that has anchored your belief system? That's just such on shining display in this book. And then secondly, this is from Paula Tarek. She asks, in high school, what was your direction? What aspirations did you have? And did you have a taste for justice at a young age?
So great questions. I'll take the second one first. I didn't know anything about a career in law enforcement or think about it in high school. I thought I wanted to be a doctor because I believed that, and my parents instilled this in me, that I had an obligation to give back. We were middle class, but we were taught, you're incredibly fortunate. You have to help other people with what you have. So I was going to be a doctor and studied chemistry in college because I was going to be a doctor. And then a tortured journey, I decided it was better to be useful as a lawyer. So I didn't know. But high school actually helps answer the second question, because a terrible thing happened to me as a senior in high school. A guy invaded my parents' home in a really scary story that I told in my first book. And I thought I was going to be executed that night, twice actually. Not thought, I was certain that I was about to die. And that gave me a perspective that has stayed with me. I am constantly asking, so how will I talk about this at the end? What will I care about at the end? What will matter to me at the end? That forced me to turn the telescope of life around in a way that doesn't happen with many younger people, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody. And so I think I have an obligation to try to help people, to relieve suffering, to try and give back to others. And I know what I want to be at the end. I want to have been a great husband, father, grandfather, neighbor, and community member, somebody who helped people who needed him. And there's lots of ways to do that. We're not in the government. We're foster parents. I can't think of work that's more meaningful and that's more of value than that kind of stuff. So that's what I tether to. I want to think about the end, and I want to be able to say truthfully that I did the right thing for people who needed me, because I've been given so much by fortune.
Well, and a connected question, and this is from one of our outstanding high school fellows, Seed Lally, who's sadly graduating this year and on to other pastures. But she says, given that public service requires people of such high integrity, would you be willing to return to public service should that bell come ringing for you once again?
It depends on what you mean by public service. I will never run for office. I can't imagine being back in a leadership role in the justice world. I don't think I should be. Actually, I've intentionally became a partisan after I was fired because I thought it's really important to the country that Donald Trump not be president, and I have an ability to have a marginal impact on that. And I couldn't look at myself at the end of this life if I didn't do everything I could to make that a reality. So having been a partisan, you shouldn't have a partisan as the Attorney General or the FBI Director. And so I doubt it'll be in a government role of any sort, but there's lots of ways. I mean, look around CIR. There's lots of ways to serve your fellow humans without being in a government role. And so I don't know what I'll do when I grow up. I wanted to work as hard as I could to see another person become president, and now I'll figure it out. And I don't know exactly what that'll be, but unlikely in the government.
All right. Question here from Herb Smith about the Clinton emails, but I'm going to draw the connection to President Trump's phone. Is anybody responsible for ensuring, folks at higher levels of government are really following correct communications protocol? I think we were always waiting for another shoe to drop around, Trump's use of an unsecure iPhone and what that could mean for national security. The same could be said not only for Secretary Clinton's emails, but I know that pattern of a private server has been used by other Secretary of States. So what's happening there? And from your seat or former seat as FBI director, what should happen in those instances around communications and national security?
Yeah, important question. I actually think it's about the Hill. There are in the White House, national security component, and in the State Department, all other agencies, people whose job it is to ensure that the principals are equipped with devices they need to have secure communications, and that they're aware of and abide by the restrictions on where you can have classified conversations or classified emails. It isn't about using Gmail or a private server. Who cares? It's about, do you talk about classified stuff on an unclassified system? And I don't know Secretary Clinton. I've actually never met her, but I know from the investigation and from what I've seen about Donald Trump, as different as they are, it's actually a similar problem. People were not comfortable telling them to knock it off, telling them, you can't do this, this is wrong. They were intimidated looking up that hill. And so I know at the State Department, they pulled punches and didn't hold them accountable and make sure they were following the rules in a way that they never would have hesitated with a lower level leader or a line level person. And that's unfortunate. That's on actually the principal, that's on the secretary, not having created an environment where your staff members and people outside your personal staff would say, nah, boss, we can't talk about this on here. They just wouldn't do it. The hill ought to be flatter than it was in that circumstance, and certainly with Donald Trump. I mean, I'm sure you can talk about it like a hill. It's just a cliff.
Well put. Well, let me ask you one final question, and it relates directly to the closing page of your amazing book, Saving Justice. And you state that the FBI should remove J. Edgar Hoover's name from the headquarters building, from FBI headquarters building, and name it instead in honor of civil rights icon John Lewis. Can you comment on why you chose Congressman Lewis for that great honor?
John Lewis, I hope I don't have to explain who John Lewis is to everybody on this call, but John Lewis represents a principle and a commitment to American values that everybody needs to remember. I invited him to come speak during Black History Month at the FBI, and he came and we got a chance to sit and talk together privately. And he was very funny about being at the FBI. He said he never thought he'd be at the FBI except maybe in handcuffs. And it was extraordinary. And I said to him that one of my challenges is changing the FBI internally and its perception externally so people of color and women will come here and be special agents and help protect America, and that his being here was part of sending a message inside and outside. The same message still needs to be sent by the FBI, but law enforcement more broadly needs to send that message. We have a problem in this country, especially in relationships between law enforcement and the Black community, and I can't think of a more powerful symbol of both change and the need for change than stripping off the name of a racist abuser of power, J. Edgar Hoover, and replacing it with an American icon, somebody who represents the best of us. And I'm actually almost finished with John Meacham's great book about John Lewis's life. It makes me all the more convinced that it's the right thing to do.
Well, Jim Comey, thank you so much for headlining our gala tonight. That was an absolute pleasure listening to you. Please come to Santa Fe. We would love to have you here in person.
I'd love to come. You're lucky to be there.
Yes. And Valerie Plame, always such a great pleasure. Thank you so much for your great questions and your great presence. Just so grateful for you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Sandy. It's been an honor, Jim.
Thanks. Same, Valerie.
So folks, I promised that I would update you all on where we are at with fundraising for the night. And I've got a nice graphic to show us where we're at. And we are achingly close to $60,000. And my graphic didn't come up somehow. In our ticket sales, we sold about $11,000 of tickets. Our sponsorships were $16,000. And tonight we've raised $31,794. That takes us to a total of $58,769. We're so close to $60,000, which is just tremendous, just a fantastic response from all of you out there. So thank you so much for everything that you've done. We are greatly appreciative of that. And I guess in the absence of my graphic pulling up, I am just going to say thank you all for joining us tonight. We're thrilled that you've joined us. This talk will be available for all of you on YouTube if there are other things that you'd like to watch. Well, let me just quickly acknowledge before we go, Western New Mexico University and Joe Shepard. Thank you, Joe, for donating $2,500 to us tonight. Really tremendous outpouring from all of you out there. So thank you all so much. Have yourself a great evening. And I really look forward to our student program staying as robust and healthy and strong as possible in the days and months and years to come. So thank you all so much, and have yourself a great evening. Bye-bye. Bye.